Wow, it's time for Temple of the Infinite Universe. Now where are my slippers? Well, welcome again to Temple of the Infinite Universe Radio. Today the topic is going to be prejudice, acknowledging and dealing with the beast within. And as I was reflecting on this topic just the other day, and actually I've been reflecting on this for quite a few years now, it has occurred to me over the course of that reflection that most people who are prejudiced, and I think that includes just about everybody within the sound of my voice, including myself, we really don't realize that we are prejudiced. Or if we do realize that we're prejudiced, I don't think we fully realize the scope of our prejudice. Prejudice, on a very basic level, is the tendency to prejudge either a person, a group of people, a nation, a religion, a situation. We think we have all the facts, and we can sit back and we can point the finger and we can safely say from the comfort of our own worldview and our own inner voice, which may be somewhat off, that I know what is involved here. I know who's guilty, I know who's in the wrong, I know who's in the right, and I don't have to listen to any more of your mumbo-jumbo, because I got this all figured out, thank you very much. But then after some time, if we have the time to reflect and to examine ourselves, we begin to realize that we really don't have everything all figured out, that our prejudgment may be off, and may be radically off. We eventually, if we're lucky, and if we do the inner work of examining ourselves, we begin to realize that the story that we have, that we took to be truth, that we took to be the whole truth, that story may have been truth for us, but it was not the whole truth, that there is another side to the story that we did not know, that we did not want, that we did not hear, and in many cases there's a side to the story that frankly we just didn't want to hear. The philosopher Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And that's a very profound statement that I learned back in high school, back when I thought Socrates was pronounced Socrates. It's the way it's spelled. But the unexamined life is not worth living. And yet, if we look at ourselves, is not the life that we live on a day-to-day basis, at least from time to time, a rather unexamined life? How do we go through this life? Do we go through it looking at ourselves and looking at our actions and looking at the consequences of those actions and ask ourselves, have I been the best possible person I could be today? What are my flaws? What are my strengths? Where can I do better? Or do we just go through life in automatic pilot? Get up, brush our teeth, drink a bunch of coffee, go to the bathroom, go out, do our job, come back home, sit back, relax, turn on the tube, and vegetate. I have a feeling that's the kind of life a lot of us have been used to. And I would call that an unexamined life, because in that form of life, we're not really looking deeply at ourselves, at our own attitudes, at our own inner strengths, inner weaknesses, and inner beasts. And we just don't face ourselves for the people that we are, the people that we have been. And without facing the people that we have been and the people that we are, we really lack the tools to grow into the people that we can be. The great, strong, wonderful people that we can be. This requires a certain level of self-examination. And self-examination requires a certain level of inner courage and inner strength and the willingness to admit when we're wrong, how we've been wrong, and have the courage to change. And when that time comes, when we see the need to change, sometimes accepting that change can be like pulling teeth. Sometimes we are dragged into the future kicking and screaming, which I think is probably the more popular route for many people. Or we can choose to enter the future walking on our own 2 feet, head held high, doing the inner work necessary to examine ourselves and to make needed changes where changes need to be made. But most people who identify, or whom we can identify as prejudiced or racist, many of those folks have not done the inner work that is required to be able to see their own level of prejudice and their own level of racism. And this is true for folks across the board. Now, what is popular in our media today is that we like to point the finger of blame at somebody else, at another group, another race, another group, another economic, sector of our society, and point the finger of blame and say they are racist. How can they not realize how racist they are? How can they not see how unjust they are? How can anybody not get the injustice that is in this situation? But improvement does not come by pointing the finger of blame at other people. I used to think that in order to change the world, we had to go out there and change society. But then, over the course of many years, I began to realize that society is made up of a bunch of individuals. Flawed, weak, wonderful individuals like you and me that have their inner strengths and their inner weaknesses, and they're not always sure, they don't always have the sight to know what those inner strengths and inner weaknesses are. They're living unexamined lives. And when we begin to examine those lives, our own lives, go deep within on a deep inner level, and begin to see the problems that exist within ourselves, and take the actions necessary to change those problems, not all at once, but on a day-to-day basis, encountering and encouraging one day's growth in one day's time, then we begin to change ourselves. And when we change ourselves, we begin to change a section, a small part of our society. And when that small part of our society is corrected, is changed, it can radiate out to the rest of society and facilitate change and growth on a far wider level. So we don't change the world by going out there and electing people. I mean, I'm all for democracy, and I'm all for voting for, the political party of your choice and doing it wisely with eyes wide open. But that's not the whole solution to the problem. The other part of the problem that we ignore is the need to change ourselves. If we have a bunch of people voting who have toxic attitudes, who do not know that they have toxic attitudes, who go out there, they're going to go out there, they're going to cast toxic votes, and they are going to elect toxic candidates who reflect their own inner toxic attitudes. But if we change our toxic attitudes, examine our lives, become better people, and live and act on those corrected inner values and inner strengths, then that reflects in our outer life, and it reflects in all of our activities, whether it's the job that we do at work, the volunteer work that we do for worthy causes, or the votes that we cast for worthy candidates for public office. So it's not all about voting, although voting is important. But it's about examining ourselves, changing ourselves for the better, and doing that inner work that's needed to become better people. I'm going to share a story about two groups, actually two people. I don't know their names. I knew the one woman's name back 30-some years ago when her husband was my rabbi. I did a term of study in Israel back in the 1980s, and we had rabbis teaching Christian students. It was a blast. We didn't know what to expect, but it was an enlightening experience. And one of our rabbis, one of our teachers, was a man, I'm going to call him Rabbi Goldberg, not his real name, but his name I'm going to use here. He and his wife had lost their firstborn son. He had done what a lot of Israeli children do, that once they get out of high school, they do a term of service in the Israeli military, and then they go on to college. And when he was telling us the story, he shook his head and said, that is such a waste. And we didn't realize the full weight of those words until he continued on with his story. His son served in the Israeli military, and they happened across some sort of military situation. I don't know exactly what it was. But in the course of the fight, their son was killed by a Palestinian sniper. And at first, when they heard that their son had been killed by Palestinians, they were filled with remorse. They were also filled with anger and grief. And they were just bitter over the experience. And they grieved, naturally, for a time. And then for an extended period of time, having lost a son. And then their grief became so intense, and their anger and their bitterness became so intense that a friend of the family recommended that they go to this, what was billed to them at this time, a grief counseling group. And they were told that there would be mothers there. This was recommended for the mother at first. And they were told that there would be mothers there who also had lost children in the recent conflicts there in Israel, in the Middle East. And the mother agreed to go. And when she got there, she found that half of the room was populated by Israeli mothers who had lost children in the conflict. And on the other side of the room were Palestinian mothers who had also lost children in the conflict. And when Rabbi Goldberg was relating this story, he said that when his wife first saw who was there on the other side of the room, she did not want to be there. She wanted to get up, walk out, leave. She did not want to look into the eyes of the devils that she blamed for the death of her son. And through the course of the talk that would follow over the next several days, the next several meetings, and I have to take my hat off to the counselor that facilitated this group, They found out that not only were the Israeli mothers blaming the Palestinian mothers for the loss of children, Palestinian mothers were also blaming Israeli mothers for the loss of their children. And as they dialogued one with the other, talked with one another, at first there was that tendency to point the finger of blame at the other. You've murdered my son, you murdered my daughter. It was your people, it was you people. That prejudice. And they began to listen to one another's stories and take notes, and they began to realize that we're feeling much the same way. We're sharing much the same views. We are sharing the same loss. And when they began to listen to one another, began to realize that we're not enemies. We're all fellow victims who have experienced a loss. And we can all come together over this. We can stop pointing the finger of blame, because one side can blame another side and the other side can blame another side from the beginning of time to the end of the world, and nothing is going to come of it. We all have a story. We all have one side of the truth. But what we don't have is the other side of the truth, the other side of the story. And when we enter into dialogue and we allow ourselves the possibility that we're going to give up some of ourself, some of our pain, some of our hatred, some of our anger, so that we can listen to this other side of the story and admit that there might just be some truth in that. And when we admit and acknowledge the truth that the other person is telling us, and the other person is able to admit and acknowledge the truth that we are telling them, then change can happen. And in the course of this story, of course, change in this situation did not happen overnight. It was a slow, gradual change. It had its ups, it had its downs. There were hurt feelings, there was raised voices, there were arguments, heated arguments. But in the end, there was a realization that we are not that different. We both have our grievances. We all have suffered loss. And they began to break down the barriers that separated them as Israeli mothers and Palestinian mothers, and instead, over the course of time, began to simply come together as mothers who had suffered an unspeakable loss, losses that no mother should have to experience, but which sadly do happen in our world. And that hatred, that bitterness, that prejudice that both sides was holding within their hearts, but did not have the chance to examine until it was brought out through this series of mutual dialogues. That began to be exposed for what it was. It began to die away, and these women were healed of an unspeakable loss. For some of us, in order to confront the prejudice, the hatred, the bitterness, the racism that we hold within our hearts, it takes oftentimes somebody outside of us to show us, what they see, to be able to allow ourselves to see ourselves through the eyes of another person. And if we're open to that, then we can see the need to change. We can realize, hey, is that really me? We can see ourselves through the mirror of another person. And we can oftentimes see things in that mirror that otherwise are hidden. And then we have the choice. We can see ourselves through the eyes of another, ask ourselves the question, hey, is that really me? And then ask ourselves another question, if that is really me, and I don't like it, what can I do to change? And then summon up the strength, the courage to make change within ourselves and go for it. And begin living better lives. The unexamined life is not worth living, according to Socrates, and I think that is wise counsel. But in order to examine ourselves, we have to look at ourselves with eyes wide open. And this can be done through listening to other people that are close to us, listening openly to loved ones, listening openly to people we flatly do not like, and then also listening to ourselves through the practice of meditation. I'm going to take a short musical break and play a song called This Inconsequential Life.
We don't have to sacrifice. We don't have to change our ways. Just keep rolling on and on. Sleep through days and days and days. We work all day and nothing gets done. We don't really care, just passing time. We pass the days, the months, the years. We cash our checks, we lose our souls, we hide our tears. My brain is getting numb, my heart is getting weak, my body's getting old. I'm having trouble speaking, and my eyes can't make believe that they still see. I point to all of this, I'm walking away, I'm leaving no regrets. The end begins today, because this inconsequential life, it's killing me. It's killing me. Time keeps rolling like a snowball, faster and faster as it goes downhill. The youth you thought would never end it all. Oh, how you wish you could make the time stand still. And all the dreams you have protected, you tuck them away up on a shelf. Well, it seems they felt neglected and ran off with somebody else. My brain is getting numb, my heart is getting weak, my body's getting old. I'm having trouble speaking, and my eyes can't make believe that they still see. I point to all of this, I'm walking away, I'm leaving no regrets. The end begins today, because this inconsequential life, it's killing me. Feels like I'm lost with no direction. Feels like I'm blowing in the wind, and this is the end. My brain is getting numb, my heart is getting weak, my body's getting old. I'm having trouble speaking, and my eyes can't make believe that they still see. I point to all of this, I'm walking away, I'm leaving no regrets. The end begins today, because this inconsequential life, it's killing me. It's killing me. Yeah, it's killing me. It's killing me.
And that was the philosopher Mark Aaron Cantry. Who agrees with the philosopher Socrates? I almost said Aristotle, excuse me. The unexamined, inconsequential life is not worth living, but we have a choice. We can choose to continue living an inconsequential, insignificant life, getting up, going through the motions, working hard and never getting anything done. Or we can choose to live a life of significance, a life of consequence, a life of inner change. And to do that, we need to be equipped with certain tools. And I'm going to give you a few tools to put in your toolbox today. One tool, the most important one I see right now, is the willingness to change. If we have the eyes to see, that's great too. But if we have the eyes to see, but we're not willing to change, we just shrug our shoulders and say, well, I am the way I am and I ain't going to be no better. I can't change. I'm just a weak human being. Well, then nothing's going to get done. You have to have the courage to change. And you have to have the courage to change one thing at a time, one step of the way at a time. We don't go out and change our entire life just over the course of one seminar or one weekend or even 1 month. It takes time, one day's growth in 1 day's time. And we're not going to get it all right off the bat. We may not get everything corrected even in the course of one lifetime. But we have to do what we can do in the moment, day by day, 1 day at a time. We make the changes we can make, and the changes that we don't think we're capable of, well, don't sweat that right now. Just do what you can. There is a beautiful line in an early Christian document. Actually, it's a pre-Christian document. It's a document that comes from the days of the early apostles, before Christians were known as Christians, and reflects what I believe to be the earliest teachings of Jesus. It's called the Didache. And there is a beautiful line in the Didache that says, if you would be perfect, keep all of these commandments. And the commandments contained within the Didache are very weighty and very difficult. And it says, if you would be perfect, keep all of these commandments. But if you are not perfect, what you are able to do, that do. And I'm adding this is not in the Didache, this is my understanding. Do what you can. And in the end, if you cannot be perfect, let grace fill in the blanks for you. Do what you can. And that's a perfect way to start. A lot of us, we focus on trying to be perfect. And that is an impossible task. But we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be willing to make changes as we see them, as they come up. Have the courage to make those changes 1 day at a time, and just do what you can for that day. And don't let anything else concern you. Just do what you can for today. Let the grace of the divine take care of the rest. Just do our part. Let the divine do the part of the divine. So yes, the willingness to change, the courage to change daily, 1 day at a time. Another tool that we can use is openness to see ourselves through the eyes of another. Listen. Engage in dialogue with other people. Listen to your friends. Listen to your spouse. I always thought that was very easy to do, and then I got married, and now I'm finding that, it's not always that easy to listen to your spouse. But you know what? It is wonderfully beneficial when we do that. Sometimes my wife is just full of wisdom, and if I don't listen to her, I can't make the changes I need to make in my life. There's a reason the two of us were drawn together. Part of the reason is that she could show me the other side of myself that needs to be changed. And I'm still trying to figure out my part in the situation. She'll have to tell you that. But yeah, listen. to your friends, listen to the people that you trust, listen to your spouse, and finally, listen to yourself through the practice of mindfulness meditation. Thich Nhat Hanh is a great teacher of mindfulness meditation, and he has used mindfulness meditation in a very similar way a way very similar to the story I shared about Rabbi Goldberg. He got together a group of Israeli mothers and a group of Palestinian mothers in Plum Village, France, and they sat down for a very long weekend, or I think it was over a period of at least a week or more, for a retreat on mindfulness and peace building and mindfulness meditation. I forget exactly what the official title was called, but he brought together these separate groups of mothers who had suffered loss in the Arab-Israeli, Palestinian-Israeli conflicts. And you would think when you got people like that together, you'd be inciting a small war, but he was able to use the power of mindfulness meditation to calm them, to get them to listen to their inner voice, to their inner selves, to their deeper selves, and to come to the realization that they weren't separate warring tribes going at one another tooth and toenail. They were the same family, the same tribe, having some very ugly family problems. And by the end of that retreat, a significant number of the Israelis and the Palestinians were able to come together and say, "Sisters, we're one." It doesn't happen overnight. And people that go to retreats like that don't always experience that outcome. Some people are very hard nuts to crack. We can be hard nuts to crack. I know I was. But if we have that willingness to see, to accept the need for change, to listen to other people in mutually respectful dialogue, and to listen to ourselves through the dialogue of mindfulness meditation, significant wonders can be worked, and inner peace can be had. And if we get enough people together experiencing that inner peace and acting on that inner peace, world peace can follow. At least that is the illusion, if indeed it be one, to paraphrase Gandhi, that I am living under at this point in time. This broadcast has been brought to you by the Temple of the Infinite Universe in Wheatland, Missouri, a interfaith outreach located in, I said that already. To check us out on the website, go to our web address, www.hermetictemple.com. And until tomorrow, I will be signing off, wishing you a blessed day of discovery. Thanks for tuning in.